Welcome to the Think Like a CFO podcast, where we dig into not only what it takes to start a business, but to keep your business thriving for years to come using my signature CFO money method framework. I'm your host, Melissa Houston, and I am a CPA and business financial coach. I have over 20 years of experience in business, and it is my passion to share my knowledge of business finance and personal finance with other women. You can also follow me with my column at Forbes.com or my column with Entrepreneur.com. On today's show, I have the privilege to speak with Anik Tracy, who will be sharing her personal story on how her and her family decided to downsize their home, strip away the debt, and start living life on their own terms. Anik is 45 years old, has been married to Justin for 21 years in a row, says Justin, and they have two beautiful boys aged 14 and 18. Anik works full-time as a public servant with the Government of Canada and enjoys working out and reading. I am very excited to have Anik on the show today, and I appreciate her raw honesty while she speaks about the journey that her and her family took together to get out of debt. When I asked Anik if she had any regrets about this journey she's going to speak to us about, her answer was, I wish I had done it sooner. Hi, Anik. I am so glad to have you on the show today. Welcome to the Think Like a CFO podcast.
Thank you, Melissa, for having me as a guest on your podcast and for being interested in my story. I have to be honest, I never thought I would talk openly about this, but yet here I am.
Well, you have definitely been an inspiration to me, and I know that you're going to inspire so many listeners because you have got one fantastic story, and I'm super excited that you were willing to share it with people because the reality of it is most people feel a lot of embarrassment and don't like to talk about financial situations, and I just absolutely applaud you for your courage and your dedication towards this topic.
Great. Well, I'm happy to be here. Happy to share.
So I'm just going to give listeners just a little bit of a background. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I just want people to know that I met you probably about 6 months ago, back in March, I believe. Shortly after I started my business, you had reached out and you were talking to me about, how you wanted to change your finances in your life, and you shared your story with me, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I went over to your house and I interviewed you and your husband, Justin.
Yes.
Got the whole story from you, and I knew that when you were ready to help other people by sharing this story, that I wanted you here to share it.
Good. Well, here I can give you a bit of background because, Justin and I go way back. We've been married now 21 years in a row.
In a row.
In a row. I had to slip that in there. That's his joke. Had to put that in. I'm a mother of two teenage boys. They're 18 and 14. I work for the federal government. I'm in my mid-40s. Oh boy, I'm just listening to myself now and yikes, I sound pretty boring.
But you are anything but boring, Anik.
Okay, well, thank you, Melissa. But what your listeners may be more interested in is how we went from being in a lot of debt to downsizing our home and starting to live a more authentic life.
Yes, absolutely.
So here's some background. We bought our first townhome when we were in our late 20s as newlyweds. 4 years later, we upgraded to a single home. And then 7 years later, we bought an older home in a more mature neighborhood. To us, that felt like it was the natural progression. That was adulting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we started getting ourselves in trouble financially. The house was never quite like we wanted it, so we started putting money into it. Some fun stuff, some not so fun. We switched from oil eating to natural gas, designed a brand new kitchen. 1 year, we had to fix the pool. We started changing windows, finished the garage. There was always something. It was so discouraging.
Okay. Now, also, you've got these big house expenses, but I also want to point out the fact that you've got two growing boys in the house too. I'm sure that added to the expenses as well.
Well, absolutely. And with sports, the boys were into hockey, into soccer, into basketball. There was always, expenses that went along with that. But we also had other priorities. It was so important for us to take family trips with our boys.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Disney when the boys were little. Then 5 years later, we took them on a Disney cruise. When they got a bit older, we then went to New York City. We did all the touristy things, took them to a Broadway play, walked around in Central Park. And then we had a 2-week dream vacation that we took driving down the Pacific coast from San Francisco to LA. We don't regret any of these trips at all. We are so happy to have made these memories as a family.
So then, can you walk us through how you finance those vacations and the kitchen renovations and paying the mortgage on your house and just basically, keeping up with living expenses?
Well, I remember, so for the kitchen renovation, we simply added it to the mortgage. It was just one of those, we added it, we had equity in the home. And so we just added it to the mortgage. So then, that bumped up the amount, of course. For trips, see, I thought I was being so smart. We were, saving up our credit card reward points, and that's how we would pay for our flights and so on. And I would save for the vacation. So we always thought that we weren't getting ourselves into debt for, we just knew they were important and we made it a priority for us.
So when you took vacations, they were paid for before you went on vacation?
Mainly. Or partly.
Yes. Okay.
Partly.
Okay.
But we would prioritize that over new furniture or over, it was just a big, it was a priority. It was a priority for sure. But how we got ourselves in that, I talked to you before about our frugal habits, and it's just, it's a funny thing because both Justin and I can be extremely frugal.
Yes, and that's one thing that really impressed me about you guys. We live in Ottawa where, parking's expensive downtown. You guys took the bus to work, which is very common in Ottawa. You brought your lunch from home. Your expenses were very minimal.
I know. It didn't make sense. One of my most frugal habits is to borrow ebooks and audiobooks from our local library. I always say I wouldn't be able to afford my reading habits. I always have a few on the go. I like to read romance novels, but I like to listen to self-improvement audiobooks. And just to give you an idea, here's a list of some of the audiobooks I was listening to and aspiring to for making lifestyle changes.
Okay.
There's Joshua Becker's The More of Less, The Minimalist Home, Kate Flanders' The Year of Less.
Oh, I read that one. That was a good one too.
Oh, such a good one. And I just read her follow-up book, which is The Adventures in Opting Out.
Oh, okay.
It's really good as well.
Okay.
Courtney Carver's Soulful Simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And so those were all really, really good books. And we even went to see the Minimalists at Algonquin College in September 2017 after being inspired by their Netflix documentary, Minimalism.
Okay.
But as much as we tried to declutter and achieve this type of lifestyle, we were never able to attain it in that home. It just wasn't possible for us there.
So when did you realize that the home was starting to be somewhat of an issue? And what kind of signs were coming through to let you know that this was the problem?
Well, we were just never getting ahead.
And by ahead, you mean financially?
Yeah, just financially, just never getting ourselves ahead of, just couldn't do it. I don't know. It just, but let me take you back to April 2019. This is when we realized something had to change. So we had a really large mortgage, just over $415,000. We had 2 maxed out lines of credit, combined total of $76,000, and 2 credit cards. Those were not maxed out yet. They were at $22,000, something like that. But those were keeping us going. It's so crazy, the amount of credit that we had at our fingertips. We never missed any payments, never had calls from creditors. And if anybody's keeping track of those amounts, that's over $500,000.
I love that you're sharing these numbers with us. That is just so valuable for so many listeners because it just puts a real number on it. And first of all, it helps other people to know that they're not alone. You're definitely not alone with your debt levels. And I'd love to hear, more about this story.
Sure. So at that time, I was in discussions with my friend, who's also our mortgage broker, to look at refinancing. Yet again, we had been here before. Over the years, we had been lucky with the purchases and sales of our homes. We'd always made money, therefore had equity in our homes. When we were in our 30s, we thought, we have all the time in the world to pay this mortgage off. But then when you get in your 40s, the amortization period no longer coincides with when you plan on retiring. So, that gives you pause.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember that It was a Thursday night when I read the email from her. She was confirming the amount that we would qualify for to refinance. And it would cover nearly all except for $4,000. But I realize now that this was a blessing in disguise. I was sitting by myself. Our older son was getting ready to go on an exchange program trip to France the next day. My husband and my younger son were playing in the basement. I remember this because I could hear them laughing, and I was upstairs silently sobbing. I take care of our finances. So at that moment, it felt like it was all on me, like I had let my family down. It was Easter long weekend. We spent the weekend with family, pretending like everything was okay. I put off the difficult discussion with my husband until the Sunday night. We felt like we had no other choice but to sign the papers and start the vicious cycle all over again. Once all the papers were signed, I emailed my friend to let her know and to tell her to go ahead. That's when she wrote back, "Call me." That phone call changed the course of our lives. We had a great chat. I remember her telling me that she was surprised we were going through with the refinancing. I have to be honest, at that point, I honestly thought we had no other choice. But I should back up a little bit here and mention that this friend and her family had downsized the previous year. And I remember that after listening to Joshua Becker's The Minimalist Home, I sent her a text to tell her how proud I was of them. They had done it. They were so brave. But don't get me wrong, because we thought they were nuts at first, but I soon realized I was envious of the life change they had made and that the freedom they had attained, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't think we could ever do that. For years, I'd use the excuse that we could not relocate because of the boys and their schools and their friends. And while we were talking on the phone, it came up that their current townhome would be up for sale soon as they were preparing to move to another townhome that was currently being built. And that's when I made the joke, "You should buy your townhome." And I remember saying, "I'm kidding, but maybe I'm not kidding." And I think I said this a few times. So she said to me, "Go home and talk to Justin." So I came home from work. We were standing in our kitchen and I blurted out, "I think we should downsize and buy their townhome." Justin looked at me. He's like, "Okay." Just like that. What? But just like that, everything fell into place. That day, I'd seen a quote. I love quotes. It said, "If you keep doing what you're doing, where will you be in 5 years?" At that moment, it was clear something had to change because I knew that in 5 years, we wouldn't be better off.
That is very courageous. That is a very brave decision to make. And I appreciate the honesty. Can you maybe talk a little bit too about the emotions involved? I know you touched on the fact that you felt that you had, failed your family,
Mm-hmm.
which, in hindsight, I'm sure you realized that that absolutely wasn't the case. But did you have maybe other emotions going through, like, oh my God, what will people think of us? Or,
Oh, absolutely. There's only one night. It was that night that I lost sleep over this whole decision. And, I was thinking about my younger son changing schools, my older son having to get his driver's license so that he could drive himself to his current school. But the one thing that kept me awake that night, it probably was, what will people think? To which the answer came to me. Who cares what people think? My family would be going through this journey together, and that's all that mattered. So we proceeded to sell, donate, throw out anything that we didn't want to move to the new home. It happened so quickly. Once you make the decision,
there's no looking back,
there was no looking back. And we're so happy we did.
But you felt very confident in your decision too, which is fantastic. And it's wonderful how everything just kind of fell into place, which is sort of like
It really
reaffirms that you made, the right decision for you guys.
That's right.
Yeah, I absolutely applaud that. And I think that so many people are held back by the fear of what will people think if I downsize.
Oh, I know we were.
I mean,
for a while, the years prior, when you think about it and then you decide, oh, no, not this year. We can, keep on keeping on. But
it's funny because, you speak of the minimalists also. And I mean, to be honest with you, I would love to downsize right now, but the reality of it is, and it's probably just me making, actually, I know it is me making excuses, because the reality of it is I'm too lazy. Like there's a lot of stuff in this house. We've lived here for 15 years, but I would love the freedom of downsizing, getting rid of all this stuff and just having a smaller space where I don't have to fill it up with stuff and just like, it's like that's a weight that hangs on me.
Oh, it really was. And then, you feel freer. We ended up having to get rid of some furniture, like just things that were just going to be too big for this home. So we bought higher quality furniture. So what we have in our home right now, we love. We've picked it out and we love, and we're happy about it.
It's your home.
It's our home.
Yeah, regardless of the size, the love is there, the family's there. And the size really doesn't, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't. I mean, that's just plain and simple.
No, I mean, to be honest, we're proud of owning only what we need in terms of square footage. I mean, we're even making it work now by both working from home. When we made this decision, no one was working from home.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good thing you and Justin like each other. Now, I'm curious to know, even though you feared it, did you have any backlash from family or friends? Any kind of, I don't know, disapproval or surprise or, just negative, unsupportive comments?
No, I think if anything, our friends were probably surprised, but everybody seemed supportive. And that's when you realize everybody's going through their own stuff. Like they will only think about you for so long, right? I mean, then people move on, honestly.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think the one that was most surprised, I want to say, it was our father-in-law. I think he just really loved, our older home in a mature neighborhood. And I think that was just, what he pictured for us, let's say. So now he comes and visits. I mean, he loves our home, but he just finds, there's lots of vehicles out in the road, and like it's just a busier neighborhood. And so to him, that's, I guess, something to get used to.
Yeah. I mean, the reality of it is it's your home, and the fact that you're comfortable there is what really matters. And he always has his home to go home to be comfortable in.
Exactly.
Okay, so Anik, even though, you said your kids were supportive, did any issues come out throughout the whole process with them? Because, they were leaving their neighborhood, their friends, their schools, and maybe, just maybe their friends had made some negative comments about it.
We were expecting those kinds of comments, and why, and you're moving to a smaller home, and I don't know, either they're hanging out with good people or they just didn't, or maybe it's because it's boys. I don't know if boys care less.
Boys definitely care less.
I guess so, because we never had them. It was just, and I suppose we were at, it was a good stage. Our older son had gotten his driver's license. Therefore, he could drive himself to school to finish grade 12. He could drive back and see his friends, and sometimes stay overnight. So I think he misses sort of living in that neighborhood, but because he's got his driver's license, I think it would have been different had he not. And then COVID hit, and then we were all stuck at home. So it wouldn't have mattered. I think it might have even been easier at that time that we were far removed, that he wasn't getting together with his friends.
One thing when I was over at your house talking with you and Justin, I do remember, and I thought it was really touching, was you had said that, if anything, the downsizing of the house brought your family closer together.
It did. We see them more. Yeah. And they just hang out. They're just funny because sometimes we call them our cats, because, I mean, you'd see our stairway and they would just like sit there, like perch themselves, just kind of hanging out, looking at their phones. It's just funny because, and anybody would attest to this, when you move to a new house, you pick up new habits. And so these were just cute things, I guess, or just, we do see them more.
Yeah, I bet that's a really nice feeling, especially since they're teenagers and you tend to see less of them as they grow older. So it's really nice that there's definitely that cohesive family unity within the house.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
we have an island now, which I'd always wanted, even though we had redesigned a kitchen at the other house. We hadn't knocked down walls and it hadn't allowed for an island. But here we have the center. And even I find that we entertain more here. It's just more of an open space. I mean, and then again, COVID, so we can't really entertain that much. But just when it's our family, we're just kind of standing around the island. Like there's just more of a togetherness for sure.
So one thing that I don't really think that we touched on, which is really important, which we probably should touch on, is part of the reason that you ended up in a situation of buying too much house.
Hmm.
I believe, if I'm remembering our conversation correctly, you tended to take the higher amount of mortgage that you were pre-approved for when you were house shopping.
We just thought that was what you should do. And I wish I remembered. I just remember, going out shopping for your first house, let's say,
Hmm.
and qualifying for a home. I just thought that's what you did. And I don't know where I got that. That, okay, you're given, and I remember our first townhome was 142,000. And so I don't know what we would have been given, maybe 145, I can't recall. But I remember, when we did our search, then that's what we were looking for. And then even when we upgraded to a single home, we would just sort of always,
Take the higher end of the approval.
and I guess we just thought that's what you did. I
Yeah,
don't know.
and
Is that normal?
it's normal for people to think that, and I'm glad that we're touching on it because I want listeners to know that that's the bank's trick as well. They always give
Right.
you more than what you can truly afford. So when you are purchasing a house, the fastest way to go cash poor or house poor
Yeah.
is by buying, like using the higher end of your approval rate. So I really caution people against that. And unfortunately, you had learned that lesson in a harder way, but the end result seems to be quite favorable.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of, we got out of it, if you will.
Hmm.
But yeah, it did trap us for a while. Definitely. It really did.
So then, thinking back to how it was in the older house versus how you are today, can you like walk through how that feels now that you're on the other end of the downsizing?
Sure. So I think sometimes when you get so in debt, what's another 500? Like what is another 500, right? So
Yeah.
so then you end up making other purchases. Ah, sure, why not? Or eating out because you just figure you're
So far gone.
so far
Yeah.
gone that what's going out for dinner on Friday night?
Yeah.
Whereas now when the goal is to pay off our credit cards and I still use credit cards and sometimes I wish I didn't, but we use our Costco credit card and Visa. We
Hmm.
use our Visa. Just that's how we roll. That's just sort of
It
how,
is a plastic society. It's very hard not to.
well,
But yeah.
that's it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And, but now the goal is to pay it off every single month. And now I find myself, if I know that we're pushing the limit, I'm like, no, we say no to, like, there's so many. And I mean, again, with COVID, we haven't been shopping as much. We haven't groceries. We've been buying a lot of groceries, but just shopping for clothes. What's the point?
Hmm.
Why do I need
Hmm.
more clothes? I have lots of clothes and I'll just keep, but sometimes I just like to go look again, or the boys my younger son needed some clothes to go back to school. And so that gave me
Hmm.
the excuse to walk into Marshall's and look around. And I didn't buy one thing for myself. I kind of held
Uh-huh.
things up, kind of, you feel some fabrics and you just walk around. And then I was like, I don't need it.
That's awesome.
That's different. I've
So would you
changed
say that you're definitely more mindful with your purchases?
100 times,
Yeah, and you realize that there's
100%.
really not much that you need right now. You've got pretty much everything.
Well, pretty much everything. There's certain things. So we're getting, so we've been in our home now for exactly 1 year. And I wanted to get those California shutters for our bedroom.
Hmm.
So we have two large windows in our bedroom, and saved up for them, paid half when I put in the order and they're being delivered in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll pay the balance. And so that's the difference. It's to like really think, what do we need? What do we want? And exactly, you know, and save up for it. And I figure we'll be here for a while. Might as well, you know, spend our money on something we really want.
And how does that feel, knowing that you've saved for this purchase, you admired it, you had the money, you bought it, and it's paid off? That's got to feel fantastic.
It does. It feels so like it's yours. Like you don't have to feel bad. Like no guilt. You know, you work for it.
Yes.
You made the decision. You really wanted it, and it feels good. Feels good.
Well, that's fantastic. You know, I love every story that you talk to me about with your money situation. I appreciate your honesty so much, and I know that listeners are probably listening on every word that you're saying and feeling like, you know, you're so relatable, and they're probably very, very happy that they found this podcast today. What would be the number one takeaway you'd want listeners to walk away with today?
Well, so that's a good one, and we've touched on it. And I know that I'll be telling my boys this when the time comes for them to buy a home, is to not purchase a house for the maximum amount that you qualify for, to give yourself some breathing room. Because I read an article a while back, and it gave great financial advice. It started off by saying that most people who overspend their income, they do so in one of three ways. They either have too much house, too much car, or too much entertainment. And we were definitely too much house. There was always something that had to be done, had to be upgraded or fixed. And I realized now that I was never content there. I was always thinking up of new renovations, new furniture, new decoration ideas, but that we just couldn't even afford. So I was just never satisfied, never happy. And I can honestly say that we've found contentment in this new lifestyle. Yes, it's a smaller, modern home that we love, and it doesn't need much work. We have fewer things, and which reminds me of that Joshua Becker's description of minimalism, which is the intentional promotion of the things we most value and the removal of anything that distracts us from it. We make time for what's important. We spend more time in nature. We've started cross-country skiing and hiking. We enjoy our workouts in our garage. We've converted our garage into a home gym, so the whole family takes advantage of that. And I've also changed my attitude about happiness. It's no longer reliant on possessions. And for the main part, we've changed our buying and spending habits. So like I mentioned, you know, we plan and we save for first before making a big purchase. It's not easy, but I've tried to stop comparing myself to others, because someone will always have a bigger house, a fancier car, cooler clothes, expensive handbags. But it's time to accept that we're all different and unique. It's time to embrace it and be grateful for what you have. And I'll quote my younger son when asking him how he feels about this journey to downsizing. He looked around at our new open concept main floor and matter-of-factly said, "It's all we really need."
I love that.
I know.
That is fantastic. I mean, you know, I've heard this story a few times from you, yet I'm mesmerized every time I hear it, because it's so genuine and authentic, and, you know, you're really happy. I can hear it in your voice, like,
Really.
and there's no doubt that you made the right decision for yourself. Like,
and we've been honest with the boys, you know, about our financial struggles and our triumphs. I mean, they're old enough now, we can talk about that. And I think it's been a good lesson for them.
I firmly believe that when you're honest with your children about finances, it's the best, greatest gift that you can give them, because financial literacy is a skill that takes you through your life. So you're doing a great job parenting as well.
Good. Well, thank you.
So I can't thank you enough to have you on this show today. I'm so glad that you shared the story. I know I sound very repetitive, but I am super grateful. And if you ever want to reach out to Anik, you can contact myself, and I can pass along a message if you ever have any questions, or you just want a little bit of inspiration from her, or whatever the case may be. And thanks again, Anik.
You're welcome. Can I just, before we go, just mention a few of these quotes that I've accumulated along the way?
Absolutely.
Okay. So these are just, I mentioned earlier that I love quotes. And so here goes. Being broke is hard. Getting out of debt is hard. You can do hard things. Choose your hard. and stop comparing yourself to others. Your life is different, so embrace it. Start a gratitude practice. That really makes a difference. And you're not defined by where you live. And our family is proof that less is definitely more.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing those.
You're welcome. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks for listening to the Think Like a CFO podcast with Melissa Houston, CPA. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it. Until next time, I'm Melissa Houston, and remember, nobody will ever care about your business as much as you do. So never give your financial power away.